Good afternoon. Governor Scott Walker, joined by a number of individuals here from law enforcement and federal, state, and local agencies. You're going to hear in a moment from a number of individuals I'm joined with today. First off, I'm going to introduce in a moment the head of the Division of Criminal Investigation and Department of Justice. You'll also be hearing from one of our great police chiefs, one of our great sheriffs, special agent in charge here for the FBI in Milwaukee, and of course from General Donald Dunbar, who's not only the Adjutant General of the Wisconsin National Guard, but is my top advisor for the state when it comes to Homeland Security. And really what we're all reinforcing, and we'll be taking questions at the end, but what we're reinforcing now, particularly as we go into the holiday season, is something that we brought to the attention here in Wisconsin about 3 years ago, and that's the "If you see something, say something" campaign. It's real simple. We were talking about this earlier today when I was up in Oshkosh with the New North and talking about it in the days to come as we have in the past. And it's particularly important this time of year as we go into the holidays, but it's important 365 days of the year. And that is, while there are many agencies at the federal, the state, and the local level working on keeping the people of this state and this country safe, whether it's safe from criminal activity or it's safe from terrorist activity, being it foreign or domestic, that the most important tool, or one of the most important tools that we have in those efforts, are everyday concerned citizens here in this state. And so If you see something, say something campaign really focuses on the premise that more often than not, and we've seen this not just here in Wisconsin, but in the research that's been done across the country, that some of the most effective means by which we can prevent activities we're trying to prevent from happening is because a concerned citizen sees something. It might be a package, it might be a device, it might be a weapon, or it might just be the actions of an individual or a neighbor, and passes that on to someone, more often than not, in local law enforcement, and then they can look into that. Now, I've heard in the past, we've talked about this, people say, "Oh, I don't want to be a bother, I don't want to be a burden." We make it easy. It's something as, we've got a lot of respected law enforcement agencies in this state, so for many people it's as simple as letting a local police officer, a sheriff's deputy, or someone else in that community know, passing that information on. I know years ago, long before I was governor, my wife and I were block captains in our community in Wauwatosa, and oftentimes we had right by our phone, not only 911 for emergencies, we had the non-emergency number for the Wauwatosa Police Department. If we saw something in our community, in our neighborhood that raised a concern, we passed it on. More often than not, it was nothing, but local law enforcement appreciated that and the opportunity to go check that out. So as a part of this campaign, we're encouraging that, saying if people see something, whether it's around your home, whether it's at work, whether it's out in the community, it's not just, as we've talked about before, people taking notice at areas where airports or transportation hubs and things of that nature. It's any activity, whether it be while shopping, being at a civic center, being at a public appearance, being out with family and friends and coworkers, passing that information on to local law enforcement. We also make it easy if people don't want to do that. Again, we stress, obviously, if it's an immediately threatening situation in each and every one of those instances to call 911. But if it's something that people just notice and it's not an emergency, whether it's passing it on to local law enforcement or simple, statewide, they can go to wiwatch.org or call in at 1-877-WI-WATCH, and that information will be passed on. And again, through the collaborative efforts that you see represented here today, we will make certain that whatever tips that are passed on are thoroughly looked into. It's incredibly important. It's something that, again, many citizens may feel like, I don't want to burden people by bringing this up. It's much easier to look into things than not. We do so in a way that's very protective of understanding that we want to be careful to protect in a just and civil society people's civil rights and their liberties, and so it's done in a way that is done very carefully and appropriately, so that if there is nothing going on there, that information is done in a proper and professional way using the training that these great professionals and the people that they represent bring to the table. But again, I think to keep us safe now and into the future here in Wisconsin, around the country, we need people to step up and to let us know about situations that raise concern so we can look into them, with the hopes being that more often than not it's a situation where it ended up not being anything critical at all. But it's a lot easier to have that situation than have something happen and somebody afterwards. We've seen all too many instances of interviews that are conducted after something has happened around the country or around the world where people say, well, I noticed some odd things about that person who lived down the block, or I thought it was strange that that was happening. And it's a lot easier for people in law enforcement and the combined efforts of each of these agencies at the federal, state, local level to look into things that concerned citizens bring up. So with that, we're going to hear from a number of our speakers. We're going to start out with David Matthews, who is the administrator for the Division of Criminal Investigation for the Wisconsin Department of Justice. And we'll start off with David. Thanks.
Thank you, Governor. Well, I'm pleased to be here today with this partnership that you see before you. And as the Governor remarked, we are asking for additional partners. We're asking all the citizens of the state to be partners with us. I want to make a couple comments real quickly with regard to a resource that exists in this state so people understand what happens when you call or you go online and you report something you've seen. It's incredibly important to understand that for state, local, federal law enforcement, military that are standing by to engage when a threat presents itself or when the possibility of a threat presents itself, our eyes are very limited compared to the citizens of the state. And nobody wants a citizenship that's afraid, and that's not the point here. We simply are asking to partner with us and to be aware and to pay attention in your communities where you know better than anyone else could what it is that's different, what it is that catches your attention. The resource that I was referring to earlier is the state's Fusion Center, and that is designated by the governor as a place to gather information, to analyze that information, and to distribute that information. It's designated by the governor. It's housed in Wisconsin in the Department of Justice under the Attorney General, and DCI staffs and operates that center with partners from the state, federal, local, and military, and other parts of government that play a part in that location at the Fusion Center. So when you call and you have information, understand it's put together with other information that's known around the state, around the country even, so that sense can be made of it, whether it does represent a threat and what is the best response, and become a part then of this team that you see before you that think every day about the best response to threats as they can occur. We're very happy to be a part of this team.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Funkhauser. I'm the Chief of Police of the City of Kiel, and I'm the current President of the Wisconsin Chiefs of Police Association. I'm here with my partners in law enforcement on both the federal, state, local, county, municipal, to reinforce the comments that the governor made about getting involved. And rather than repeat a lot of the comments that have already been made, I want to stress to you that from a local perspective, it's so important that our citizens engage and work in partnership with our local law enforcement. And even in communities as small as 100 to 100,000, a simple phone call can make a difference in a case. In my community of Kiel, we had an individual who was parked in a neighborhood. One of the residents thought it was odd, made a phone call. We encourage our residents to do that. That phone call resulted in the response of officers who investigated, ultimately ended up in the arrest of 4 people who were not only responsible for a burglary that just occurred, but also for trafficking narcotics and were involved in sales of weapons. A simple phone call. And when that citizen was given an award for his involvement, he credited our law enforcement for encouraging our citizens to make that phone call. So on behalf of the Wisconsin Chiefs of Police and the local law enforcement officials in the state, I encourage our citizens to work in partnership with us. We work with some great people throughout this state, and it's your job and our job to work together to keep our communities and our great state safe. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Iowa County Sheriff Steve Mitchick, and I'm the immediate past president of the Badger State Sheriff's Association. And I would like to say thank you to the governor and all the other law enforcement partners here today on this that are speaking about this issue. Badger State Sheriff's Association represents 72 sheriffs in the state of Wisconsin, and we're all troubled by the acts of terrorism, domestic and foreign, that we hear about and deal with on a daily basis. It is likely that there is a threat that lies in wait for an opportunity. Where that is, when that will happen, and who will carry that out is unknown. The thing that we need and to do is not be fearful of what can happen if something like that would take place. We need to be attentive to what is going on around us and not be fearful or paranoid, but be aware that when something that doesn't look or feel right, we need to report it. We need to allow our intuition to guide us into reporting situations or contacts with persons that don't quite feel right. And we all know what we're talking about. You have that feeling that something isn't right. Here's where we need your help as citizens of this state. By taking notice of someone or something, some activity possibly, that is out of the ordinary or suspicious, we want people to report that and report it immediately to law enforcement. Part of the problem is that Wisconsin is largely a rural state. There's a lot of rural areas in the state of Wisconsin served by small law enforcement agencies such as mine. And whether it's a city, county, or municipal agency, there are not enough law enforcement officers that can see around every corner and see everything that goes on in their respective communities. They may not have the opportunity to notice behavior or activity that is suspicious. So that's why we need you. When you as a citizen see something or know of something that may be an unusual behavior or an indication that something is not normal, report it as soon as practical to law enforcement. One of the issues I run into in my small community is, even though many people know who I am or who my deputies are, they assume that we know everything there is to know about a certain situation or individual. I would urge people not to assume that we know about an individual or an activity. Report it, even though you think someone may have reported it already. It could be that that person that you see in the hardware store buying chemicals is just purely doing an innocent activity, but you may talk to a friend later who sees that same individual somewhere else, maybe at a Radio Shack, buying wire and switches. That may be two small pieces that we need to put together information that could stop or thwart a threat. In some cases, it may be just a single event. You as citizens can make that call when something seems suspicious, and please have the character to risk being wrong, because most likely, if there's something that tells you something's wrong, you won't be wrong. So we urge you to report anything that you see as being suspicious. Again, as the slogan says, if you see something, say something. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Shields from the FBI, Special Agent in Charge for the Milwaukee Division. All the agencies represented here today underscore the strong partnerships we need to continue to keep Americans safe. Counterterrorism remains the FBI's #1 priority. Our greatest weapon against terrorism is unity, and that unity is built on partnerships with law enforcement, the private sector, and the public. It is built on the idea that together we are smarter and stronger than we are standing alone. So in partnership, we continue to urge the public to remain vigilant at all times. As we've said several times today, if you see something that looks suspicious in nature, if you hear of some information that can be a threat to public safety, please say something. We urge you to contact law enforcement, all of us, federal, state, and local law enforcement, and report suspicious activity. Together, we remain strong as a partnership to keep citizens safe this holiday season and all year long. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Don Dunbar, the Adjutant General and Homeland Security Advisor. You know, it's such an important topic that we talk about here today. It's so important to remind the public about this simple yet important technique in protecting our community and our families and each other. We all work very closely together, as has been said, not only my colleagues left and right, and of course the governor with his great leadership, but behind me you have the Homeland Security Council for the state of Wisconsin, representing state agencies and local agencies, and we meet periodically and get together and we collaborate with the FBI and DHS, all aimed at trying to do everything we can to keep the state of Wisconsin and our nation safe, just what you would expect. Law enforcement works hard on it all the time. The National Guard is working so that if law enforcement needs extra capacity beyond mutual aid, the National Guard can be there. We work all the time planning and exercising. But I tell you, I think the most important part is what we're talking about today. The citizen on the street, whether at a concert or at a mall or at a school, who sees something that just doesn't look right, trusting his or her instincts and making the report to a professional agency, using WeWatch or calling direct to law enforcement. No one's going to violate anybody's civil liberties. They're going to treat it professionally. They're going to analyze it. If it makes sense, they're going to up-channel to the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and make sure that we do the right thing. And if warranted, investigate. If not warranted, they dismiss it. I trust law enforcement. We need to trust law enforcement, but we really need to trust and get the American public here in Wisconsin involved. I also want to remind everybody that if you see an emergency, you need to call 911. This is not the type of thing that you use for if you see somebody being attacked or somebody actively doing something. That's when you call 911 and the normal processes work. This is for something that just doesn't look right, and it's making you kind of curious, and you pick up the phone and make that report or go online and make that report. And the last thing I want to reiterate, because I think it's worth reiterating one more time, the governor raised this point, I will as well. In almost every situation, terrorist, active shooter, when you do the after-action report and the professionals had a chance to unpack it, you almost always find somebody, a friend, a family member, a neighbor who saw something and didn't say anything about it. So I urge the people of Wisconsin, if you know something, please say something and let law enforcement try and protect our community. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the governor for any questions you might have. Sir.
With that, we'll open up the questions for me or any other speakers you heard from.
Is there any concern with the legal aspect? And you mentioned that people's civil liberties are being protected, but certainly there's probably a concern that there will be more contacts with people, let's say, police do dissent or so forth on some of this. Are there concerns that there could be harassment charges and things like that?
Well, I'll let other speakers talk about this as well, because it's not just an issue here. I know from the FBI standpoint, this is something the FBI does a lot of training on. All of our local and state agencies are doing training on that. So whether you've got the current volume or this campaign ups the volume, in each of these instances, we treat these concerns raised seriously, but they're done in a way that meets the training and professionalism we expect from all the men and women involved in law enforcement here in the state of Wisconsin across this country. So I think part of the reason I mentioned that is to make sure that people aren't afraid to bring up concerns, whether it's seeing a box, a device, a package, or it's seeing some activity from a neighbor, a coworker, or others out there. But I think you've seen in the past, particularly the last few years since we first announced this campaign and will be going forward, that it's done in a way that's very sensitive, that takes the concerns raised seriously, checks into them, but makes certain that it's done in a way that's professional and that protects the rights of every individual in this country.
Question for Chief Irwin. So in the city of Madison, we have lots of homeless who are leaving bags around in the area. How does a citizen know whether something is suspicious or whether something is a general part of our community?
I can tell you my officers are very active in looking around and checking bags that are left. We inventory these bags. We take all precautions. And it's that balance of civil liberties. It is someone's property. So, I can tell you my officers are very active in understanding who the people are, talking to the homeless community and the citizens around, and trying to figure out where it came from. When we get unnerved about situations is when we can't locate and we don't know or haven't seen these bags around. So that's what we do. We take an active role, learn our community, know who our community are, and learn how to work through it in that manner.
Just to add, and you'll get the next question, but just to add to that, though, I think this is important to echo, not just Gwen, per your question about Madison and with the chief, but I think to all the representatives here, you'd say, it doesn't matter whether it's a town of 100 or it's the city of Madison, city of Milwaukee, or elsewhere out there. What Chief Irwin just alluded to is one of the benefits. I talked about the training and the professionalism of our law enforcement. More often than not, if it's a reoccurring situation like you mentioned with the homeless, or it could be other scenarios like that, law enforcement is pretty well versed in that. They have good knowledge of that. And so, per the question that was asked before about protecting people's civil liberties, Greg, that you said, this is an instance where they'd say, okay, we know these people, we know they're there, but if something new occurs, and this is where it's worth repeating the see something, say something concept, is we'd rather have 100 calls about something that people see all the time and have 99 of those be, that repeat the same thing, but still get that one that's something new that could lead to a situation that could otherwise be dangerous if not picked up on. And so I think this is important for people to understand that no matter where you're at, big or small, no matter what the situation or circumstances, if it seems odd, pass that on. And with the people that are well trained in this state, they will look into that in a way that's done professionally. And hopefully it's nothing, but in the rare instances where it's not, we'd like to do something in advance to make sure that doesn't happen.
I guess that's my question follows up to that. Obviously, the chief of police from Kiel mentioned the incident where it actually led to something of capturing burglars or suspected narcotic dealers. But do you have an example, since you're reiterating something that's been in effect for some time, do you have an example of that 1% where someone saw something, said something, called your fusion center, and you, in this agency, everyone up here, essentially prevented something of, I guess, catastrophic, that if you want to call it that way? Do you have an example besides that one example?
Yeah, I'll let the other speakers talk about it, but remember you've got a couple different categories of things. You've got in the broader sense, these days and the few weeks since Paris and other things, obviously a heightened amount of attention towards ISIS and terrorist-related activities. We have ebbs and flows of that from the public's attention standpoint. Certainly those draw our attention more towards foreign terrorist acts. But a lot of this is as simple as just basic law enforcement, day in and day out. And I'll give you another example of the inverse of that. In Milwaukee, a program we've funded with the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County and the state, each putting up a third, is the Shot Spotter program, where we invest in technology that actually comes from the Department of Defense, where we can track shots within a small radius, track where the shots are, and the city of Milwaukee can deploy resources within moments to where that sometimes while the shooting's still going on, while the criminal activity is still going on. What caught my attention when I first went to tour that facility with Police Chief Flynn in Milwaukee was he showed me in a case study they did to begin with that, at least in that instance, the parameter of time they used, only 14% of the shots that they tracked was there a call associated with that to the department. Now, granted, this was in a high crime, high poverty, really challenged neighborhood, but it raised a very real concern that saying 14% of the time a shot was fired and somebody called it in, the rest of the time, nothing happened. Now, there could be a variety of reasons. It could be happen in an area where middle of the day, people were away at work, they didn't hear it, they were inside, it was cold. But in other instances, people will tell you it's because sometimes in given neighborhoods, people are afraid to call it in. There might be others involved with the activity, a whole variety of different reasons for that. But just from a criminal investigation standpoint, the more times people call in and get law enforcement involved, the more times not only can solve a crime after the fact, in some instances, if it's done immediately, could actually avoid additional injury or damage along the way. And so the idea of see something, say something certainly helps from a law enforcement standpoint. I'm sure particularly the sheriff and the chief and others have many other examples like that. From a terrorist activity, that's less so because thankfully that's less frequently occurring. But again, other instances, not just here in Wisconsin, but some of the research we looked at originally showed some cases around the country where I remember one in particular, I don't remember which state it was in, but where someone saw something at a library and reported it, and they were immediately able to get that out and avoided what otherwise could have been a catastrophic situation. So I believe there are other similar instances like that, but again, if any other speakers want to address that.
Just remind everybody about the potential car bomber in Times Square in New York City. He had a citizen walking by who noticed it and said something, and that's really the point that's being made, is that citizen trusted his instincts and said something about it, and it did avert. Now, maybe it didn't get reported on a website or a phone call, but the point's still the same. Trust your instincts. If it doesn't look right, it probably isn't. If you make a phone call and it turns out to be nothing, you know, it's not like someone's going to go to jail or violate their civil rights. You're just checking out that oddity.
Would someone elaborate on like the behavior, the odd behavior that the number of the speakers talking about? What if your neighbor's doing something odd? Can you say more information about what that odd behavior is?
Well, it's part of the instinct. It's just one of those where, I guess the best example, a number of the speakers have mentioned, and I've talked about this before, is the sad reality is all too often. I remember, for example, in Milwaukee, after the gentleman who went and had the horrific acts at the Sikh temple, there were a number of you in the media who went and talked to neighbors of his, as we often hear in other situations like that, and people will say, well, yeah, it seemed kind of odd. There were things he was doing that seemed out of the sorts. There's no one list. There's not a litany of things out there. Again, it's one of those where, as the sheriff mentioned, so much is as simple as a gut check. If people think something seems odd, not that it's a particular act, but out of sorts, out of character, within the context of what's happening. Again, it's not there's not a profile of things that fit that characteristic. It's more a matter of within a situation, if things are looking a certain way. A number of the law enforcement have mentioned to me before in the past, you know, oftentimes in a public setting, if someone's out of sorts, part of it is if you can't see their hands. If they're in, you know, usually that's a good indicator that something's going on that they don't want others to see. Now, that doesn't mean that's the case all the time, but again, I stress that the importance here is that law enforcement is under vigorous training. It's one of those where it's easy to look into, and then if there's nothing there, to just move on. But I think for most of us, in light of the circumstances, not just of late, but as we've seen in the past, it's easier for law enforcement to check into it. It can be done in a way that's essentially non-threatening. And for a lot of folks, they won't even know that anything was even looked into, but it's better to check into situations and tips like that along the way.
Right now, we're dealing with a very unfortunate situation in California. Is there any insights that can be gained? Does this numb the populace to these horrific acts that we keep seeing almost every other day?
Well, Well, certainly it's awful, and as I've said all too often in the past, for us, for Tonette and I personally, our hearts and our prayers go out to anyone involved, any of the families of the victims, and I don't want to go too far on this only because it continues to be an active situation from what we've seen in the reports and we talked about even on the way out. So it's hard to make a true assessment about this case just because it's fluid. And one of the things I've learned over the years, even the local governments, the last thing you want to do is comment about an ongoing situation because it's going to change many times over. I do think, though, it reinforces the argument we're making here today that in all too many of these instances, there's something that predated this. There's something that happened in advance that raised an eyebrow, if you will, to use a common phrase, that people said, whether it's the act and conduct of an individual, or whether it's something they saw, whether it's a package or other things. And, you know, there'll be a lot of debate, as there have been on previous situations like this around the country about, you know, do situations like this, are they premeditated by, across America, a significant lack of adequate treatment for mental health services? It's one of the things that we responded to several years ago. We put more money into mental health services than any governor had in 25 years, not just because of traumatic situations like this, but just in general because we thought that people needed to be the treatment. One of the common denominators we've heard in other instances, though, sadly, even within the last few weeks, are people who are chronically falling through the cracks when it comes to mental health services. That's an issue where we need to break that stigma, and I think that helps far beyond just the extremes, but just overall. There'll be debate in this Capitol about firearms and things of that nature, and there'll be people on all different sides of that. The one thing, though, I think not only amongst the speakers, but amongst the Homeland Security Council and others who are involved in this issue that I think is, if not universal, pretty close to universal, though, is that as much as we can get the public engaged, as much as we can get them to be thinking about and not be numbed, not just to the crises, but not be numb to looking around and being mindful of paying attention to their surroundings, doesn't guarantee that it will always stop this, but the more times people notice things and bring them up to law enforcement, the more likely we are to avert tragic situations from happening in our communities, in our state, and in our country.
Governor, you mentioned the terrorist attacks. Obviously, you previously mentioned that Wisconsin would not accept any Syrian refugees. I guess the question that you're still trying to get clarity on, legally, can the state do that?
What the state can do is, I've instructed our cabinet, particularly our Secretary of the Department of Children and Families, not to be involved in the process of settling refugees into the state of Wisconsin. Legally, I can't put a wall up at the border, but I can do that, and I can, as other governors of both political parties have, raise serious concerns to the president and to his administration. And let me be clear, I'm not opposed to refugees, even those of Syrian descent. What I'm concerned about, when I've asked, as other governors have asked this president to do, is to stop the process until they can assure us and the people of this state and the people of this country that they can be absolutely certain that the people who live and work and reside in this state can be safe. And you know, I feel for the people who are refugees. The United States has spent about $4 billion on helping settle refugees within the region around Syria, so it's not the United States hasn't stepped up, and I think we need to continue to do that. But I think we need to be certain that we can ensure the safety of the individuals in this country. And so far, I've gotten a letter back that says that we can, but I got a letter from an administration where the president on the 13th of last month said that morning that ISIS was contained. And then hours later, Paris happened. I don't know about all of you, but for me, that's a little unsettling to think about the President of the United States. I don't care if Republican or Democrat. The President says ISIS is contained, and this happens in one of the dozen or so mega cities of the world. Either one of two things happen. Either our administration didn't have adequate intelligence to know that something like this was a threat. That's pretty concerning to think about. Then that same administration is going to tell us that people are safe to come in because they've done a check, even though they didn't know about the attack in advance. Or they did know, and they didn't tell the American people, which to me is equally as unsettling. And so either way, what I'm trying to do is on behalf of the state say, you know, for many of us, we're willing to take refugees, we're willing to do our part to help out and support individuals who are facing really awful situations. We just want to make sure that this administration can guarantee that they're doing more than just pushing paper. And I just got a letter back yesterday from the White House that told me that I was going to get a customized report. I actually got it right there. A customized report. It says a tailored report for the individual state submitting the request. It actually says I'll get a password to use it. And then as I read the letter, it says the monthly report would include the total number of refugees resettled in the state, broken down by nationality, age range, and gender. To me, you all in the media should demand that that information be available to you publicly accessible. I mean, age, gender, and the nation they come from, to me, it doesn't sound like it's highly confidential information out there. That's information the public should have access to. I think I'd feel more confident on behalf of the people of the state if I could say the password-protected information that I and my administration could look at could tell me about what they did to check the backgrounds to ensure the safety of the people coming in here, but we don't have that right now. And so until then, I'm going to continue to raise that as a concern, as have other governors of both political parties.
Yes, time for two more.
Is that coming into Wisconsin or the United States, or you just referenced that you'd be able to see?
Did I do what?
Is that what the refugees that are coming into the entire United States, or just Wisconsin, would you be able to see with the info they gave?
The info they gave us in that letter said the password was, that's where it said it was tailored for each state. So the information I would get a password that would tell me how many people are coming in, what countries are they coming in from, what's their age range, and what's their sex. Again, I don't know about all of you in the media, I don't want to do your job for you, but to me that all seems like information you should all have access to. It shouldn't require a governor to have a password to get access to. If they were going to go further and say, and we did the following checks to ensure that these individuals weren't aligned with ISIS or Al-Qaeda or other terrorist-related groups, then I can see, to protect, you know, the privacy of individuals, why that might be protected. But the information that they've, at least are selling to us in this letter as being tailored for individualized states where governors are making this request, seems like it's basic information that should be available to the public.
Are you saying that the U.S. government doesn't do background checks to see if refugees are
Well, what I'm saying is, they don't give us any information one way or the other as to what level they're doing it on, and my confidence is what's at question right now of this administration. I go back to the point on the 13th of November, that Friday, the President of the United States said that ISIS was contained. Those were exact words, was contained. Hours later, we saw the massive attack occur in Paris. Now, I don't expect that the President of the United States or his intelligence team would know exactly the time and the moment, but I would expect that if you have sufficient intelligence, it would tell you that there might be a concern brewing within a given area, and at a minimum, you wouldn't make a statement to the American people that a group is contained when you fear there's a threat. So either they didn't know about that threat, or they did and they didn't tell us. Either case really shakes the confidence and I think the majority of people in this state and in this country have, that if they don't know that, how can they guarantee the safety of the people of the state and this country about the refugee process?
Last question, guys.
And how Supreme Court decision made shutting down the program, was it, or affirming, or sorry, refusing to revise the decision of John Doe program shutting down?
Well, as you all know, years ago, I said at the end that the process would validate what we'd said all along, and this is one more instance where they validated what we said all along.
That's all we have time for, you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.